The sound that broke me wasn't her voice. It was the click of the projector. My name flashed beside the words, "Ethics Breach." I stood frozen as Victoria Hale, the woman who once called me her protégé, told the board I'd compromised a merger audit. HR nodded. Security waited. My chest burned, but my mind didn't. Because the system she used to destroy me, the compliance code I'd built from scratch, wasn't hers to control. And soon, it would decide who really broke the rules. Would you have fought back or walked away? Tell me in the comments. The projector light burned against my face as Victoria Hale read from the printed statement like she was announcing weather updates. Effective immediately, Maya Trent is suspended pending investigation for audit misconduct. My pulse slammed in my ears. I had written those audit policies myself. Around the table, no one met my eyes. HR slid a sealed envelope toward me. The paper made a soft hiss as it scraped the glass. My name looked foreign in black ink. Victoria didn't even look at me when she added, "Integrity must be consistent, regardless of tenure." The words hit harder than the accusation itself. She was wearing the necklace I gave her years ago after our first compliance win. The same woman who used to say I was the conscience of Helix Systems now smiled like she'd cut out a problem. My throat was dry, my voice useless. Every second stretched, the board's silence, the flickering of the PowerPoint that still bore my watermark, the smirk that curved when she realized I wouldn't fight back. HR waited for me to stand. I gathered my badge and pen, the only things that still felt mine. Victoria leaned closer as I passed, whispering, "It's just business, Maya." Her perfume was familiar. Her betrayal wasn't. As the door clicked behind me, I knew what everyone in that room didn't. Every word she weaponized came from a system I built, and the system doesn't forget its author. The silence after that meeting followed me home like static. I sat in my apartment surrounded by unopened boxes from years of never moving, my laptop screen glowing with the only thing that still connected me to the company, an offline backup I'd made months ago. It was a reflex, not defiance. I had built Helix's compliance framework myself. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I re-entered the old encrypted portal. It still recognized me. My access hadn't been revoked yet. I scrolled through the audit logs, every file stamped with digital fingerprints. The one attached to the fraudulent audit Victoria blamed me for had my signature, but not my timestamp. It was created at 2:14 a.m., hours after I'd been logged out by the server. Someone used my clearance remotely. The only person with parallel authorization was Victoria herself. My stomach tightened. The metadata showed she'd uploaded that file through a private proxy, one of the internal test servers I built for system integrity trials. She hadn't just sabotaged me, she'd used the architecture I designed to do it. I checked the board's internal communications archive next, something most executives forgot existed. There it was, a series of drafts Victoria had circulated weeks before my suspension, all echoing the same phrase: operational overhaul through compliance restructuring. She'd been softening them for my removal. Every word dressed in corporate polish but laced with intent. I leaned back in my chair, letting the realization sink in. I had spent years believing precision was protection, that if every policy was airtight, no one could weaponize it. I was wrong. Precision only protected those who respected the rules. But I wasn't out of options. Buried deep in the compliance charter, I'd written a clause 5 years earlier during a merger crisis, an emergency whistleblower immunity protocol tied directly to system integrity flags. It had never been used. Most executives didn't even know it existed. Section 7.3. I whispered the number aloud, like a code word from another life. If I triggered it correctly, it would notify federal compliance and shareholders simultaneously, bypassing all internal hierarchy, including Victoria. The irony almost made me laugh. She thought she'd silenced me with policy, but policy was my language, and I was about to rewrite the definition of control. The next morning, I walked into the data compliance lab like a ghost. No one stopped me. Most assumed I was still part of the audit cleanup team. That was Victoria's mistake. She assumed humiliation would keep me quiet. I went straight to server room C, the one with no cameras, where the temperature never rose above 60 degrees. I'd spent half my career in that hum, surrounded by machines that never lied. I logged in through a maintenance console, tracing the forged audit report line by line. Every digital signature left behind a microhash, something no one but the system architect would ever know how to find. And I was the architect. I found it within minutes, her personal encryption key embedded in the XML header of the fraudulent file, an impossible overlap with my clearance. She'd signed it using the same key I had generated for her 3 years ago, when she begged me to set up her secure executive channel. "For emergencies only," she'd said then. The irony was surgical. I exported the forensic trace, then moved to her email archive stored in the backup queue. There, in the metadata of a forwarded thread to the board, I found timestamps that didn't align, messages marked "reviewed by Maya Trent" at hours when I was logged out. The files carried hidden routing IDs that all pointed back to her office terminal. I opened her meeting logs next. She'd been hosting pre-merger alignment sessions with outside consultants every Friday at 6 p.m., long after staff had left. The session notes referenced fast tracking, leadership confirmation, and clean slate compliance under new oversight. She wasn't planning to share power. She was clearing the field. My pulse steadied, not rage, just certainty. Evidence wasn't emotion. It was math, time, and truth. I copied everything onto a clean drive, encrypting it under a phrase she once said to me. "Trust is a luxury for the naive." Her own words would unlock her downfall. By noon, I had enough to destroy her reputation 10 times over, but I didn't send it anywhere. Not yet. Evidence without precision was just noise. I wanted symmetry. She had used my system to frame me. I would use that same system to expose her. Before leaving, I slipped into the executive suite under the pretense of returning equipment. Her door was open. She stood at her desk, rearranging the glass trophies that lined her shelf. Leadership excellence, ethics in business, woman of the year. Each one gleamed under the soft LED light like proof of an illusion. She turned, startled for only a moment, then smiled that corporate smile, sharp, managerial, empty. "You shouldn't be here, Maya," she said softly. "HR's clear on that." I held up the badge she hadn't yet revoked. "Funny, it still works." Her eyes flickered, just enough for me to know she'd already moved on to her next manipulation. "You built good systems," she said, "but you never learned how to use them." I smiled then, not out of defiance, but because I knew she had just confirmed what I needed. The arrogance, the overconfidence, the belief that control meant possession. She never understood that ownership of a system isn't about passwords or titles. It's about authorship. Every safeguard, every policy, every line of code bore my digital signature, and those signatures were immutable. She could forge a report, but she couldn't rewrite the architecture. That was her blind spot. I walked out without another word, my hand steady on the drive in my pocket. By the time the elevator doors closed, the plan had already written itself in my head. She thought she'd locked me out. She'd just handed me the master key. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with nothing but a cup of burnt coffee and the hum of my laptop. The evidence sat on the drive beside me, cold, perfect, undeniable. Every forged timestamp, every digital fingerprint, every trace of Victoria's arrogance compressed into a single file. My cursor hovered over one document in particular, the compliance charter. I had drafted it during Helix's last crisis, the one that nearly sank the company. At the time, the board wanted a fail-safe for internal corruption. I wrote Section 7.3, a clause buried under technical language so dense most executives skipped it. If executive interference compromises audit integrity, all documentation shall be escalated to federal oversight and shareholders without internal approval. No vote, no gatekeeping. It was a self-executing trigger. I'd never intended to use it, until now. I logged into the administrative console using the lowest access path possible, an old QA portal that bypassed the notification system. My fingers didn't shake. They moved like I'd rehearsed this years ago. I uploaded the encrypted report, attached the verification hashes, and activated Section 7.3 with a single keystroke. A soft ping confirmed transmission, one copy to the Federal Compliance Board, another mirrored to Helix's shareholder registry. Within minutes, the system acknowledged escalation and locked the related files to prevent internal deletion. Victoria couldn't undo it, even if she tried. The moment she turned on her computer, the red flags would appear. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling as the glow of the screen faded to stand by. For years, I had taught new analysts that control isn't about possession. It's about knowing where the leverage lives. Tonight, I proved it. I wasn't hacking the system. I was obeying it more precisely than anyone ever had. I drafted a short internal note, addressed only to legal and HR. Per compliance policy, Section 7.3 has been activated. Please prepare for federal coordination. No accusation, no explanation, just procedure. My tone was the one thing Victoria had underestimated. Calm. The kind of calm that unnerves people who built their careers on noise. I shut the laptop, placed the drive inside a sealed envelope, and slipped it into my briefcase. When dawn crept through the blinds, the city was still quiet. I dressed like any other day. Neutral blazer, low heels, no emotion. The elevator ride to Helix's lobby felt longer than usual. As the doors opened, I saw the security guard glance up, uncertain, then nod me through. My badge still worked. Good. By the time Victoria reached her desk that morning, her inbox would be glowing red with compliance alerts she couldn't contain. I didn't plan to see her reaction. I didn't need to. The counterstrike wasn't about confrontation. It was about inevitability. Systems fail loud. Truth fails quiet. And the quiet had already begun to spread. By the time I reached the Helix parking lot, the air already felt different. Tight, electric, the way it does before a thunderstorm. I sat in my car, watching through the windshield as employees rushed toward the glass doors, their phones lighting up with the same alerts that had just hit my private inbox. Federal compliance review? Active. Immediate response required. I had expected silence. Instead, the system moved faster than I anticipated. Within minutes, the company network locked non-essential access, triggering automatic transparency protocols. Every audit file Victoria had touched was now visible to shareholders. She'd wake up to find her own paperwork dissecting her in public. I stepped out of the car, walked inside, and followed the sound of commotion. The investor webcast was supposed to start at 9. It was already live. Screens across the open lobby displayed the stream. Victoria at the front of the conference room, voice steady, hair immaculate, trying to control the narrative. "These compliance flags are procedural," she said smoothly. "A standard systems review." But even from a distance, I could see the strain in her posture. Behind her, red notifications began stacking across the shared dashboard. Forged entry detected, authorization mismatch, signature conflict. The viewers could see it too. A murmur rippled through the audience, both in the room and online. The board chair, Mr. Kent, leaned toward his mic. "Ms. Hale," he said slowly, "are you saying you were unaware of these inconsistencies?" Victoria hesitated just long enough for the pause to become an answer. She smiled that same corporate smile she used when cornered. Our systems have redundancies, and sometimes old credentials. Another alert popped up mid-sentence. Uploaded by V. Hale, device, executive terminal, timestamp 02:14 a.m. The exact moment she'd framed me. The crowd shifted, the hum turning sharp. One of the investors unmuted, his voice cutting through the broadcast. So you're telling us your compliance head was under investigation, yet your own credentials created the flagged file? Her face froze. The delay between question and answer was the longest 10 seconds of her career. That's an internal matter, she managed, but her voice cracked on the last word. Kent turned to the camera, his tone suddenly formal. Given the severity of these findings, Helix Systems will suspend Chief Operating Officer Victoria Hale pending full audit verification. The words hit like a gavel. I stood still, my pulse even, watching her composure fracture. The live feed caught it all, her jaw tightening, her hand gripping the podium edge, the sudden blink she couldn't hide. She tried to speak, to salvage control. You can't... Another alert cut her off, this one from the Federal Compliance Board itself. Notice of investigation, unauthorized modification of audit data. The seal of the agency filled the screen behind her. Gasps echoed through the hall. The system had done the work for me. The whistleblower clause wasn't dramatic. It was automatic. Procedure had become justice. Victoria's voice faltered completely. This is a misunderstanding. But Kent was already speaking over her, calmly, almost clinically. We thank you for your service, Ms. Hale. Please coordinate with legal for the transition process. His gaze shifted off camera. Maya Trent, if you're viewing this, the board requests your presence. My name rolled across the live broadcast, unplanned but irreversible. The employees in the lobby turned to me like I'd been conjured. I didn't flinch. I walked toward the elevator, each step measured, steady, the sound of my heels echoing through the marble floor. When I reached the boardroom, Victoria was still standing there, pale under the fluorescent lights. The camera had been turned off, but the silence was heavier than the broadcast itself. She stared at me as if she could undo the last 20 minutes by sheer will. You did this, she whispered, half accusation, half disbelief. I met her eyes. No, you did. Her throat tightened, searching for anger, but all she found was fear. For the first time she seemed small, trapped not by me, but by the structure she had underestimated. I didn't raise my voice, didn't gloat. I simply said the words that had lived rent-free in my head since the day she betrayed me. Integrity doesn't collapse under pressure, Victoria. People do. The board members filed back into their seats, the room thick with the smell of cold coffee and panic. Victoria's badge lay on the table, motionless. When security arrived, she didn't fight. She walked out as quietly as I had days earlier. Same hallway, different ending. And as the door closed behind her, the air shifted again. Not victory, clarity. The kind that only comes when the truth has nothing left to prove. The boardroom emptied slowly, as if no one wanted to be the first to breathe. Mr. Kent motioned for me to sit, and for a moment, I felt the weight of 17 years collapse into that single chair. The same seat Victoria once called her command post. Now it looked smaller, stripped of the illusion she'd built around it. Ms. Trent, Kent began, tone measured, your actions this morning likely saved this company from regulatory disaster. His voice softened. The board has voted unanimously to reinstate you as Chief Integrity Officer, effective immediately. The words didn't rush through me like triumph. They landed like equilibrium, precise and quiet. I signed the reinstatement form, my pen gliding across the page without hesitation. No speeches, no applause, just ink on paper and a collective exhale. Kent continued, We're launching a full internal review under your direction. The floor is yours, Maya. It was the first time anyone had said my name in this room without condescension. I stood, scanning faces that had once avoided eye contact. "We'll start with a transparency rebuild," I said evenly. "Every financial movement in the last 6 months will be audited in public view. I don't want discretion. I want documentation." Heads nodded around the table. Even the investors on the screen leaned closer, intrigued, relieved. I added, "No one gets punished for loyalty to the wrong person. They get retrained or reassigned. But if they lied, they'll be removed. Quietly and completely." It wasn't vengeance. It was procedure, exactly as written. After the meeting, Kent walked me to the hall. "You're handling this with remarkable restraint," he said. I smiled faintly. "Restraint is the difference between a correction and a collapse." He nodded once and left me standing, at the glass window overlooking the city. The skyline glimmered with the kind of light that follows a storm, sharp, honest, almost sterile. My reflection stared back, not the woman who'd been accused, but the one who'd rewritten the rules without breaking them. Down below, employees moved like normal again, unaware of the quiet tectonic shift above them. I thought of the nights spent documenting loopholes, of the policies I wrote knowing one day someone would try to bend them. I didn't design those systems to trap anyone. I built them to survive betrayal. And they had. When I reached my office, the door still bore Victoria's nameplate. I peeled it off slowly, placed it in the drawer, and replaced it with my own. Then I opened my inbox. Hundreds of unread messages flooded the screen. Apologies, congratulations, offers to talk. I ignored them all. At the top sat one new message from HR. "Transition assets have been restored. Please advise on public statement." I typed only one line in response. "No statement. Let the records speak." I leaned back in my chair, letting the hum of the servers fill the silence. Power didn't roar. It whispered. And in that whisper, I realized I hadn't just reclaimed a title. I'd reclaimed the truth. The building felt different now, quieter, lighter, but alert, like it was holding its breath after the storm. I arrived before sunrise, the same way I used to when no one noticed I existed. The lobby lights flickered on as I passed, motion sensors greeting me like old friends. My office was stripped bare of Victoria's plaques, the glass walls reflecting nothing but morning light. I powered up my terminal, restoring the last set of systems she'd buried under strategic access. The interface blinked, familiar and obedient. One by one, I reinstated employees who had been quietly pushed aside: analysts, auditors, coordinators, the people who kept Helix honest before the noise drowned them out. They didn't ask for explanations, they just returned to work, calm and purposeful. Within a week, we'd rebuilt the compliance framework from the inside out. Every transaction was now transparent, every document traceable. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The system Victoria tried to weaponize had become the company's shield. I met with HR in the smaller conference room, not the boards. "We're restructuring the culture," I said simply. "Performance is measured by accuracy, not politics." The younger staff smiled, cautious but hopeful. I promoted one of them, Daniel, a quiet analyst who had been passed over 3 times despite flawless work. He blinked when I handed him the new title. "Why me?" he asked. "Because you do the right thing even when no one's watching," I said. Later that evening, when the offices emptied, I sat alone at my desk and opened a new document. Helix Systems, Ethics Certification, the first of its kind. At the bottom, the signature line waited. I reached into the drawer, pulling out the same pen Victoria used to forge my name on the audit. The weight of it felt different now, neutral, balanced, honest. I signed my name slowly, deliberately. The ink spread clean, final. Outside, the city's skyline shimmered under a pale glow, reflections of glass and consequence. I wasn't interested in revenge anymore. That had never been the goal. What mattered was restoration, the quiet kind that leaves no ashes, just order. Truth had taken its time, but it arrived exactly when it meant to. A month later, the noise had settled into memory. Helix was steady again, numbers rising, morale restored, but I barely noticed. My focus was narrower now, deliberate. Each morning I arrived before dawn, reviewed the previous day's transparency logs, and watched as the system ran flawlessly, untouched by ego. The federal audit closed in our favor, confirming full compliance and clearing my record completely. Victoria's name disappeared from the industry circuit. Rumor said she'd left the country to consult privately. I didn't ask. Some stories don't need sequels. One afternoon, while finalizing quarterly disclosures, I found an internal message from an unknown sender. "You proved integrity can fight back." No signature. Just that. I deleted it, not from indifference, but because it didn't need to live outside the moment. That night, as the city dimmed beneath my office windows, I realized what power really was. It wasn't control or revenge or the satisfaction of seeing someone fall. It was endurance, the kind that stays quiet long enough to outlast manipulation. I closed my laptop and looked around the office that had once been a battlefield. Now it was just a workspace again. No ghosts, no weapons, only order. In the silence, I thought of the code I wrote, the one that had protected me when people didn't. I whispered the old compliance phrase I'd built into its framework, the one Victoria never understood. Integrity enforces itself. Then I turned off the lights and left the system running. When I look back on everything that happened, what stands out isn't the betrayal. It's how fragile power becomes when it's built on shortcuts. Victoria believed she could bend the system because she'd learned how to speak its language. But what she never understood was that the system remembers. Every login, every signature, every timestamp. Nothing truly disappears. In the end, the same structure she thought she controlled exposed her. That's what arrogance does in a corporate world that worships speed over integrity. It creates fractures that eventually speak for themselves. I learned that revenge isn't about tearing someone down. It's about preparing so thoroughly that the truth doesn't need defending. My retaliation wasn't rage, it was leverage, patient, precise, silent. The weapon wasn't a lawsuit or a scene, it was the system itself, redirected toward accountability. When you build something that can withstand corruption, you don't need to shout when you're betrayed. The framework does the speaking for you. In today's American workplace, where performance often outruns ethics, this lesson matters more than ever. Arrogance may get the promotion, but documentation keeps the seat. For anyone who's been gaslighted, sabotaged, or underestimated, your power lies in patience, not panic. Keep your receipts, know your policies. Write the code that protects you long before you need protection. When the system turns on the liar, it's not coincidence. It's math. How to get started today. Document everything that carries your name. Emails, approvals, deliverables. Learn the compliance language of your company. Know where the rules live. Build procedures that protect integrity, not ego. Be patient. Truth is slow, but it's permanent. Revenge by redirection isn't about destruction. It's about preparation so complete that no one can erase you. If you've ever faced a system built to silence you, tell me. How did you fight back? Comment your story. Share this one. And subscribe for more true stories of quiet power and accountability.